The room was huge, bigger than any building the human had ever seen on Earth. Strange lights floated in the air, shifting colors slowly like liquid rainbows. Around the room, dozens of alien cadets sat on hovering benches. Some had wings, some had many eyes, some had scales that shimmered like glass. They all looked at the front of the room with a mix of fear and respect. The human, small and unarmed, walked in slowly. He felt out of place, but he kept his head high. He had heard stories from other humans about the Galactic Coalition Academy, where only the strongest or the smartest survived. He was neither the strongest nor the smartest, but he had learned to observe carefully. At the front of the room stood the instructor, a tall alien with 3 arms and purple skin. His eyes were black like pools and he moved with perfect precision. He carried a small glass bottle, clear as water, with a label that glowed red in alien letters. "Cadets," the instructor said in a voice that seemed to echo in every corner of the room. "Today we study poisons. Not just any poisons but the most deadly substances in the galaxy. This liquid," he held up the bottle, "is Class Omega. No known species can survive it. 1 drop can kill instantly." The aliens around him gasped. Some of them had studied poisons before, but none had seen a substance so powerful. The human leaned forward slightly, trying to catch a faint smell. It was sharp, almost like chemicals, but something about it seemed familiar. He shrugged to himself and sat back. The instructor poured a tiny drop onto a metal plate. The drop seemed to float above the surface, glowing faintly. "Even the vapor is deadly," the instructor warned. "Inhaling it will cause your cells to shut down within seconds. Touch it and you die instantly." The aliens nodded nervously. They had read the reports, they had memorized the warnings. But today they would see it in action. The instructor looked at the human. "And you," he said, pointing one of his 3 fingers. "Do not touch this liquid. Do you understand?" The human smiled slightly. "Yes, sir," he said politely. Some of the alien cadets whispered to each other. They had not expected the human to respond with such calm. Most humans, they thought, were fragile and weak. A single drop of air that humans breathed incorrectly could kill them. And yet this one seemed relaxed. The instructor frowned. "Calm is good," he said, "but caution is better." He picked up a long, thin rod and dipped it into the glowing liquid. He moved the rod carefully, showing the cadets how fragile life could be when exposed to such a poison. "Remember," he said, "one mistake, one careless moment and you will be gone. Not dead slowly. Gone instantly." The human nodded politely again, watching carefully. He noticed tiny details the alien seemed to miss. The way the liquid refracted light, the small temperature change around it, the faint smell that reminded him of a drink from Earth. He had tasted something like this before. The instructor continued with demonstrations. He added small amounts to different alien substances. Some substances fumed, some turned dark, some even exploded in tiny sparks. Every time the instructor reminded the cadets of the danger, and every time they nodded, wide-eyed and nervous. Finally the instructor returned to the front. He held up the bottle again. "Now, cadets," he said, "observe carefully. This is not a test of courage. It is a test of survival. Do not make a mistake. Do not underestimate this poison." The room grew quiet. Even the floating lights dimmed slightly as if the building itself waited. All eyes were on the bottle. The human leaned slightly closer. He smelled it again. It smelled alcoholic. He thought of the small bars he had been to on Earth, the cold glass in his hand, the warm burn going down his throat. He almost smiled, remembering it. The instructor noticed the human leaning. "Do not move closer," he shouted. Even the smallest mistake could be fatal. The human straightened up, smiling politely. "Yes, sir," he said again. The aliens whispered among themselves. How could a human be so calm? They had been taught humans were weak. They were taught humans could not survive simple tests that other species handled easily. Yet here he was, watching the most deadly poison in the galaxy with no fear. The instructor frowned and adjusted the bottle in his hand. He had not expected this. He had faced humans before, yes, but none had shown such calm. He was curious now, maybe even a little worried. "Today," he said finally, "you will all learn that caution is not enough. Knowledge is not enough. Some substances are beyond comprehension. Some substances kill before the mind can react. And some, apparently, cannot kill at all, if you are human." The human tilted his head slightly, still watching, still calm, still ready for whatever would come next. He had no idea that in this classroom of death, he was about to do something that no alien had ever imagined. The human watched the glowing liquid carefully. Every alien cadet in the room seemed tense, their eyes wide, some even trembling. The instructor's 3 arms moved with precision, showing how even the smallest error could end life in an instant. But the human noticed something the others did not. The liquid smelled familiar. Not like death. Not like chemicals. It smelled like vodka. He blinked, trying to make sense of it. On Earth, humans drank this drink often. It was not poisonous, at least not in small amounts. Humans drank it for courage, for celebration, for relaxation. This was different from the deadly poisons the aliens had described. He wondered if the instructor had made a mistake. The instructor noticed him staring. "Do not touch it," he barked. "Do not even come close. This substance will kill you instantly. Do you understand, human?" The human smiled politely. "Yes, sir," he said, keeping his hands on his sides. But inside he thought it was strange. The cadets around him leaned back, eyes wide with fear. They expected panic, screaming, or maybe fainting. Not calm observation. The instructor poured a tiny amount into a small glass and held it out. "Observe this. See how it glows. See how deadly it is. Remember, 1 drop on your tongue, 1 mistake, and it is over." The human studied the glass. He could see the faint reflections of the room in the liquid. It was clear, smooth, almost inviting. He thought of Earth, of the bars he had visited, of the cold glass in his hand on a snowy evening. He almost laughed at the memory. Some of the aliens whispered among themselves. "Is he brave?" one asked. "Or ignorant?" another said. "Humans cannot survive this. None ever have." The instructor turned sharply to face the human. "Do you even understand what you are seeing? 1 sip and your body will shut down. Your cells will die. You will not last more than a second." His voice was sharp, but there was a hint of curiosity. The human nodded politely. "I understand, sir." He paused. Then he added, "It seems familiar." The instructor frowned. "Familiar? Familiar does not mean safe. This is class Omega poison. No one survives this." The human tilted his head and smiled slightly. "Then may I?" He reached carefully and lifted the glass. The cadets gasped. Some gasped so loudly the hovering benches shuddered. The instructor froze, his 3 arms holding the bottle midair. "Do not," he shouted. "Do not touch it. This is fatal. You will die." The human shrugged politely. "I promise to be careful." He brought the glass to his lips. Slowly, deliberately, he drank. A silence fell across the room. Even the lights seemed to dim. The aliens held their breath. The instructor's eyes went wide, almost popping out of his head. The cadets stared, frozen in disbelief. This was impossible. No one survived class Omega poison. And yet, the human was fine. He swallowed, set the glass down, and smiled. "It's strong," he said, "but fine." The instructor took a small step forward, trembling slightly. "Explain. Explain immediately. How are you alive?" The human tilted his head. "I've had this before. On Earth. It is a drink humans make from fermented grains. We call it vodka. It is strong, but it is not poison to us." The aliens murmured to each other. Some shook their heads. Some blinked their many eyes in disbelief. The instructor's face went red, or the alien version of red at least. You survive this because your species adapts differently?" he stammered. The human nodded. "Exactly. Humans have survived many small toxins in food and drink. It is how our species learn to adapt. What is poison to one species can be harmless to another." The instructor stared at him. He had studied poisons for centuries. He had never seen this before. He had read reports of human resistance to some toxins, but never firsthand. And now, in front of his class, he saw it himself. The cadets slowly relaxed, though still in awe. They looked at the human with new eyes. Not weak. Not fragile. Different. Adaptable. The human did not just survive. He had done it calmly, politely, without fear. The human noticed some cadets whispering. He smiled slightly. "It's important to know the limits of your body," he said, "and to know what is really dangerous and what just looks dangerous." The instructor's 3 arms moved slowly. "You have changed my lesson," he admitted. "You show that knowledge is not enough. Experience matters. Survival sometimes depends on the species, not the substance." The human nodded again. "Exactly, sir. That is why humans have survived so long in many dangerous places." The room was quiet for a moment. Then slowly one of the aliens whispered, "He drank the poison, and lived." Another added, "He is not just a human. He is something else." The instructor finally took a deep breath. He set the bottle down carefully as if it might explode at any second. "Class dismissed," he said softly. "Today, We learned more from one human than from all the books I have ever read. The human smiled politely and walked out. The other cadets followed, whispering, amazed at what they had just seen. Some were scared, some curious, all impressed. Humans were not what they expected. Humans could survive what no other species could. And in that moment, the human felt, not fear, not danger, but a quiet pride. He had not just survived a classroom test. He had taught an entire alien academy something they would never forget. After the human finished his sip, the room was silent. Every alien cadet stared, eyes wide, mouths slightly open, wings trembling, or scales flickering nervously. They could not understand it. They had been trained for centuries to fear Class Omega poison. Yet here was a human, calm and smiling, who had just taken it and nothing happened. The instructor's 3 arms moved slowly, almost trembling. This cannot be possible, he said. His voice was sharp, but it carried a hint of disbelief. All records, all experiments, all reports, none of them mentioned survival. Yet you are alive. The human tilted his head politely. I'm fine, sir. It is strong, yes, but harmless to me. Harmless, the instructor repeated, his voice rising slightly. This is Class Omega. It kills almost every known life form instantly. I know, the human said calmly. On Earth, humans have learned to survive small toxins. It's how we adapted. Some substances are poison to one species and harmless to another. A few cadets whispered among themselves. Did he just explain it? One asked. He survived because of his species? Yes, another replied. Humans are resilient. The instructor shook his head. Resilient does not explain this. Nothing should explain this. This is beyond biology as we know it. The human shrugged politely. Maybe your data on humans is incomplete. The instructor's eyes darted around. He realized that the cadets were now looking at the human differently. They were not just impressed, they were nervous. Some had feared humans before, but now a new feeling emerged, respect and a little fear of the unknown. Humans could survive what they could not. Humans could do what they could not. Suddenly, alarms began to sound. Red lights flashed around the room. The instructor's voice cut sharply through the noise. Medical drones. Scan immediately. This should not happen. There must be a miscalculation. The cadets froze. Floating screens lit up, scanning the human from head to toe. Sensors measured heartbeat, oxygen, cellular activity, and chemical composition. Everything was normal. Perfectly normal. The human watched the drones float around him, blinking politely as the scanners moved closer. I think I am fine, he said quietly. Really? The instructor frowned deeply. This is a violation of every law of toxicology. Nothing survives Class Omega. Nothing. The human nodded again, keeping his calm. Perhaps humans are different. The drones finished their scans. The instructor leaned over to read the results. His eyes went wider. He is alive. And not just alive. He is completely unaffected. No damage. No warning signs. Nothing. The cadets gasped again. Some stepped back. A few whispered excitedly. He is incredible, one said. We underestimated humans, said another. How can one species survive what would kill everyone else? The human smiled faintly. It is not bravery. Not luck. Humans just adapt. We survive what others cannot. The instructor rubbed his face. He had taught hundreds of classes, trained thousands of cadets, and studied poisons for centuries. He had seen death and survival, triumph and failure, but he had never seen this. This human was rewriting every rule he had ever known. Cadets, the instructor said finally, his voice calmer but still trembling, you must understand something. Survival is not always about strength. It is not always about speed or knowledge. Sometimes, survival depends on understanding your own limits. And sometimes, it depends on being human. The other cadets nodded slowly. Some were still nervous. Some were still unsure. But all were thinking the same thing. Humans were not fragile. Humans were not weak. Humans were different, special, dangerous in ways they did not yet understand. The human set the glass down carefully. I did not mean to cause panic, he said. I only wanted to show that I am fine. That is all. The instructor sighed. Panic is natural. When life behaves outside of expectations, even we, experts, become unsure. But you have taught all of us something today. The human smiled politely. I am glad to help, sir. Knowledge is important, yes. But experience matters too. Seeing something with your own eyes changes understanding more than any book can. The cadets whispered to each other again. He is not just a student, one said. He is a teacher now. Yes, another whispered. He survived the impossible. And calmly, the instructor finally set the bottle aside. Let today be a lesson, he said, turning to the class. Never assume that what kills one species kills all. Observe, learn, understand. And never ever underestimate a human. The human nodded politely again. Thank you, sir. As the cadets filed out of the room, many still glancing at him in amazement, the instructor paused. He looked at the human carefully, trying to imagine what other surprises this species might hold. Humans had survived impossible situations, adapted to deadly environments, and now they had survived Class Omega poison in front of an entire academy. The human walked calmly toward the exit, glancing back once. See you tomorrow, he said politely. The instructor shook his head. Yes, tomorrow, he whispered. He knew things would never be the same. Humans were no longer the weakest species. They were no longer the underestimated. And he had just witnessed it firsthand. The next day the classroom was quieter than usual. Cadets floated in on their benches, whispering to each other. Even the instructor, who usually commanded attention, moved more slowly, his 3 arms fidgeting slightly. Yesterday's events had changed everything. Humans were no longer underestimated. Humans could survive what no other species could. The human walked in, smiling politely. He had brought a small notebook, though he had no idea why. Most aliens thought humans were unprepared or weak, but he had a habit of observing everything. Every alien movement, every detail of the room, every flicker of light. Humans survived because they noticed small things others missed. The instructor cleared his throat, trying to regain authority. Today, he began, we continue our lesson on poisons. Specifically, substances that are nearly impossible to survive. Class Omega remains deadly to nearly every species. He glanced at the human. Nearly every species, he repeated carefully. The human tilted his head, smiling politely. Yes, sir, he said. I understand. Some cadets whispered excitedly. Do you think you will try it again? One asked. Don't be ridiculous, another replied. Who would be crazy enough? The instructor picked up the glowing bottle. Its red label shimmered, warning of death. Observe carefully, he said. This is the most dangerous liquid in the galaxy. Remember yesterday. Watch how a true professional handles it. The human watched quietly. He noticed the liquid swaying slightly as the instructor moved. He could almost see the colors shift like waves. And he remembered the taste from yesterday. Harsh, strong, warm going down. He smiled faintly. The instructor poured a small amount into a glass for demonstration. He held it carefully in his 3 fingers, showing the cadets how fragile life could be. Even a tiny drop on your tongue will destroy your cells instantly, he said. And yet, he glanced at the human again. There are exceptions. The human nodded. Yes, sir, he said. He reached out and picked up the glass slowly. The room went silent again. Every cadet stared. Some looked nervous. Some looked curious. All were frozen, waiting to see what would happen. Do not, the instructor shouted. Do not touch it. You should not. The human interrupted politely. I know, sir. I only wish to show my understanding. He lifted the glass carefully and took a sip. The liquid burned slightly as it went down his throat, just as it had yesterday. He swallowed and smiled faintly. Nothing happened. The cadets gasped. Some leaned back so quickly they almost lost balance. The instructor's eyes widened. Impossible, he shouted. This should have killed you instantly. The human smiled politely. It does not harm me, sir, he said. It is strong but not poison to humans. The instructor's 3 arms flailed slightly. But how? How is this possible? You should be gone. The human shrugged. Humans evolved with small toxins. We adapt. Some substances are poison to some species and harmless to others. The cadets whispered among themselves. He did it again, one said. He just drank it and lived. Humans are different, another whispered. Not fragile at all. The instructor rubbed his face. Yesterday was an anomaly, he said. Today is a miracle. I do not understand. He looked at the human closely. Do you always survive things that should kill you? The human smiled politely. Most of the time, sir. But I also try to be careful. The instructor shook his head. He had studied poisons for centuries. He had trained countless cadets. He had seen death many times. But never in all his life had he seen anyone survive Class Omega poison. Not even close. And now this human had done it twice, calmly, politely, without fear. The cadets were amazed. They had expected humans to be weak, but this one was different. He was calm in danger. He was clever. And most importantly, he survived what no one else could. The human set the glass down carefully. "I hope this helps your lesson, sir," he said. "It is important to know which substances are truly dangerous, and which are dangerous only to some." The instructor took a deep breath. "This is remarkable. I must revise my teachings. Humans survive what others cannot. Humans are adaptable in ways I did not understand." He paused, then added almost quietly, "I have never been so impressed." The cadets whispered among themselves again. "He is not just a student," one said. "He is extraordinary." "Yes," another replied. "He survived twice. And he is calm. Humans are amazing." The instructor finally regained some composure. "Class dismissed," he said. But his voice was quieter than usual, filled with awe. He looked at the human one last time. "You have changed how we will teach this subject forever." The human smiled politely and started to leave. He glanced back at the cadets. "See you tomorrow," he said quietly. As he walked out, the cadets stared after him, still amazed. Even the instructor lingered, looking at the empty space where the human had been. He had learned something important. Humans were not weak. Humans were adaptable. Humans survived what no other species could. And in that quiet classroom full of whispers and disbelief, the human felt proud. Not just because he had survived a deadly test. Not just because he had shown the aliens something new. But because he had proven once again that humans could thrive in situations no one else could. The next morning the classroom felt different. Cadets entered quietly, whispering to each other, their eyes occasionally glancing at the human. Even the instructor, usually strict and commanding, moved slowly, his 3 arms folded in thought. Yesterday and today had changed everything. Humans were no longer underestimated. Humans were no longer considered fragile. Humans were remarkable. The human walked in calmly, smiling politely. He carried nothing, just his presence, as if that alone commanded attention. The cadets watched him carefully. Some leaned forward in awe. Some whispered excitedly. All of them wondered what this human might do next. The instructor cleared his throat, trying to regain authority. "Today," he began, "we will summarize our lessons on species-dependent poisons. We have seen something unexpected. Something extraordinary." His eyes flicked to the human. "Your presence has proven that survival does not always follow the rules we have learned. Knowledge alone is not enough. Understanding is required. Observation is required. And sometimes courage is required." The human nodded politely. "Yes, sir. I agree." Some cadets whispered among themselves. "He survived Class Omega twice," one said. "And he smiled the whole time." "Yes," another replied. "He is incredible." The instructor picked up the glowing bottle one last time. The label glimmered red, a warning of deadly power. He held it carefully as if it might explode at any moment. "Observe, cadets. This is the most dangerous liquid in the galaxy. Yesterday this should have killed one human. Today again he survived. We must study this. We must learn." The human watched politely. He had no intention of drinking it again. He had made his point. Humans survived because of adaptation, not recklessness. But he understood that the lesson needed to be clear. Humans were not weak. Humans could survive what no other species could. The cadets stared in silence. Some had wings trembling slightly. Some had multiple eyes blinking rapidly. Some whispered quietly, still amazed. Humans were no longer the species to be underestimated. Humans were something else. The instructor finally put the bottle down carefully. "Let this be a lesson," he said to the class. "Never assume that what kills one species will kill all. Observe, learn, understand, and never underestimate humans." The human nodded politely. "I hope my actions help the lesson, sir," he said quietly. "It is important to understand that danger can be relative. What is deadly for one species may be harmless to another. Knowledge and observation together save lives." The instructor's eyes softened. "You have done more than survive. You have taught an entire class, and me, something we could not learn from books or simulations. Humans survive where others cannot. Humans adapt where others fail. Humans," he paused, searching for words, "humans are extraordinary." The cadets whispered among themselves again. "He is not just a student," one said. "He is a teacher." "Yes," another said. "He survived the impossible. Twice." The human smiled faintly. "It was not my intention to show anything extraordinary," he said. "I only wished to demonstrate my understanding." The instructor's 3 arms moved slowly, almost as if he were measuring his thoughts. "Understanding, yes. That is what sets humans apart. You do not merely survive. You learn. You adapt. You observe. You are remarkable." The human nodded again. "Thank you, sir. I'm glad I could help. Humans survive, yes. But we also learn from everything. From every danger. From every experience." The cadets filed out quietly, still talking about what they had seen. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Some whispered excitedly about humans. All of them knew one thing: the reputation of humans had changed forever. No longer fragile. No longer underestimated. Humans were survivors. Humans were adaptable. Humans were extraordinary. The instructor finally looked at the human alone. "You have changed everything here," he said quietly. "Not only did you survive Class Omega, but you have also changed the way we will teach every cadet in the future. You are not just a human student. You are a symbol. A reminder that life cannot always be predicted. That survival depends on understanding, adaptation, and sometimes, courage." The human smiled politely. "I am only a student, sir. But I hope this lesson helps others see the value of careful observation and adaptation. That is how humans survive." The instructor nodded slowly. "Indeed. And perhaps humans will survive many more things we cannot even imagine. And that is inspiring." The human turned to leave. "See you tomorrow, sir," he said quietly, smiling faintly. As he walked out of the classroom, the cadets whispered in awe. Even the instructor lingered, staring at the empty space where the human had stood. Humans were no longer the weakest. Humans were no longer underestimated. Humans had survived what no other species could. And in doing so, they had taught everyone a lesson they would never forget. The human walked calmly down the corridor, thinking quietly to himself. He had not just survived a classroom test. He had survived the expectations, the disbelief, and the fear of every alien in the room. And he had done it politely, calmly, and with respect. He knew humans were not the strongest. They were not the fastest. But they were adaptable. They were clever. They observed, learned, and survived. And sometimes that was enough to become extraordinary. And somewhere in the back of the instructor's mind, a thought lingered. Perhaps humans were the species to watch. Perhaps humans were the species to respect. And perhaps humans could survive anything.